Why, hello and welcome to the Georgian Book Club. Now, this week, I know I was supposed to bring you Pope last week, and I sort of brought you Pope last week, but this week we have finally got our filming schedule back where it's meant to be, and so this week we are doing some more Pope with the Dunciad. So we're looking forward to that. But before we start, remember there is our shop and our Redbubble shop. If you would like to support us in our shop, we have books, we have writing services, we have new book out just this past month. And on our Redbubble shop, we have over 100 different designs that you can get on a whole range of different products. Also, remember, please like, subscribe, comment and share. That really helps us get our videos out there and grow our audience. And, you know, we just like to hear from you. So that's the boring bit out of the way, hopefully. And on to the Pope. So what have we been looking at? Well, we have been looking at, we've got our big Pope out again, the big one, the Dunciad. And I have thoughts. Now, I like Pope. Oh God, that's a death sentence, isn't it? I like, but is an absolute death sentence. I know it's not the thing you want to hear. I like Pope, however, but I'm afraid that's where I sort of ended up with the Dunciad. There's nothing wrong with the poetry. The poetry is brilliant Pope, but we come up against the sort of brick wall that we came up against with Gulliver and the satire with Swift last time we had a look at one of these 18th century satires, because it's nearly 300 years old and I have no idea who most of these people are. Even reading the explanatory notes, no idea. No idea. And what's more, could not care less, because these people have been forgotten by history. Their only memorial in life is that they are in Pope's Dunciad, that they are citizens of the dullness. So let's actually talk about this thing. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about this in a highly academic way. I'm talking about more of this as a reader. Now, I could have spent a very long time and a lot of effort going through all the stuff about in a very all the academic stuff and all the background to this, but I don't think that's actually all that helpful as just a reader, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do here, is talk about these things. What's the reading experience of this book like, often, and as an introduction to it. So I'm not actually doing the full analytical note version of the Dunciad, because that could be done, but I believe I would need a semester of university to do that, because it would take a lot of time. So the Dunciad is in 4 books. There were 3 books written initially. The 4th was added to later later editions. Now, the 4th book has a fairly different character to the first 3 books. They're all on the same topic, but that 4th book, which I read this afternoon after having read the first 3 earlier in the week, yeah, it's different. So the Dunciad is a mock heroic, which we've seen mock heroics already. The Rape of the Lock is a mock heroic. The Battle of the Books is a mock heroic. Mock heroics are something that we are now understanding are very, very 18th century, especially 18th century satirists. And so the whole thing is a mock heroic, and the patroness of the Dunciad is Dullness, the goddess Dullness. And she has her poet laureate, who is somebody who Pope does not like, because that's how this works. This is really a extension of the ideas that Pope was playing with in Peribathos, the art of sinking in poetry, how to write really bad poetry. And here he is furthering that under the title of Martinus Scribelius, because this is a Scribelian club work, with and that's the other thing. This thing has copious notes in the back of the book from the editor of this, but also notes from Pope himself explaining what Martinus Scribelius is meaning. So it's a really layered thing. But just reading the poem itself without the notes, without all the addendum extra stuff, is more or less what I'm talking about. I did look at the notes, but at the same time, I wanted to see how this thing read as a poem, just as straight poetry. So it is a mock heroic, it is a pastoral or an anti-pastoral, because a pastoral is generally Arcadia, this beautiful heavenly countryside scene of the ancient Greek poetry. And the Dunciad is in London, in Grub Street, in Fleet Street, on the Fleet River. The Fleet River is, I believe, notorious for being choked up with dead bodies and sewage and grossness. Here we have the same characters of a pastoral, nymphs and goddesses and all of these sorts of images, and this very, very rich imagery that you find in a pastoral, but it's being applied to a grubby street in London and a grubby stretch of river in London, and the idea that poor poetry, poor writers, writers who are bringing this art form into, and not only the art form, but the very cultural life of London, into dragging it down into the gutter, is something that he's mocking, and he's using this elevated form to mock that. So we have the poet laureate, who's somebody who Pope does not like. As I said, he was collecting names of people that he wanted to use for this for quite some time. And so we have this poet being taken off and becoming the side piece for the Goddess of Dullness. We have the examples of different writing of dullness, down to the point of the very worst of the worst, who are literally down in the ooze and the sludge of the Fleet River. And we have this concept of this degradation of the literary arts as the status quo. It is a satire of the Georgian reign, which obviously Pope did not like. Pope and Swift did not like the Georgian reign. They did not like the government. They did not like Walpole. And so this is partly, their ire is directed at that and at the way that the country or the city is being run but more the country, that you know, if London is the heart of England, then it is dragging the whole country down into dullness. And I think that I can't help but sort of think, what would Pope make of today? What would Pope make of today? Because ultimately his complaint about dullness is the same complaint of a lot of writers have, less charitable writers perhaps, of, you know, oh, well, the only things that sell is popular stuff. The only thing that sell, you know, why are they selling well when it's obvious garbage? Please stop eating the garbage. Please stop reading the garbage. Please, for the love of God, stop reading the garbage. They'll keep printing it. That sort of thing. It goes to show that attitude is at least 300 years old. That Pope is basically saying, stop reading the garbage. Stop consuming the garbage because you're only encouraging them. And I think that is a fairly common frustration. It doesn't matter whether it is, you know, rubbishy stuff. Rubbishy stuff is rubbishy stuff, you know. But that is sort of the dilemma of a world with increasing literacy, which is what Pope was living in. Here you have a writer who, as most of the 18th century writers are, looking back towards the ancient world. And of course, the ancient world, what they have of the ancient world is what is the remains of the ancient world. We actually don't know. They probably had garbage too, but because the ancient world was not the very fast-paced, and I know it sounds strange to us today to say fast-paced world of printing presses and pamphlets, because it was a much slower world of which obviously had to be more, I believe that they must have felt had to be more considered, because it was handwritten, hand inscribed. You know, those papyrus were not printed. Those papyrus were all written out by hand. And actually, if you, the Satirical channel, he did a very, very good video on actually papyri and how long it took to write out scrolls, and the actual preservation of these, and the fact that these things needed to be recopied and recopied because they did fall apart. These things, cheap, easy, are remarkably durable compared to ancient papyri. So because you have someone like Pope looking back to the ancients, and it's like, oh, but Virgil and Ovid and Homer and, you know, Euripides or whatever, these are so great that he, and yet our age is just filled with this trash, and people are eating reading the garbage. Please stop reading the garbage. It's got that bias of survivor bias. So which were the manuscripts that got kept? They were the ones that people valued, so they kept getting inscribed and reinscribed, and so they survived. People didn't bother reinscribing the you know, garbage. So he's looking at a literary tradition that has a very strong survivor bias, and then he's comparing that to his own time. And of course, when we read someone like Pope, we are also looking at survivor bias. Now, while I say this thing is quite a durable item, especially one of the things that makes this durable is the mass production of it. The fact that you don't have 100 hand-copied copies, but you have several hundred of them, several thousand of them, several million of them. How many Dan Browns are there floating around the ether now? Everyone had a Da Vinci Code at one point, not me. I'm not reading the garbage, I told you. Please stop reading the garbage. But anyway, and they're just floating around everywhere. But a well-made book will last. So there is that survivor bias. We're reading Pope because there is a survivor bias. People valued his writing over the people that he is satirizing. So some of these people, we know them because he's satirizing them, not because they actually had a big literary impact. And I think that it is a complaint that's fairly common. Alexander Pope would have the same complaint today. I think he might have absolute conniptions today. It would be utterly overwhelming for him today. But at the same time, there is a real element of, it's very easy to look at the world that you're in at the moment and see the glass as half empty and look backwards and think, oh, well, there must have been this great time. Well, actually, there was probably never a great time when everybody valued it. That's the thing about mass literacy. There are people who can read Alexander Pope, and there are people for whom the Da Vinci Code is where it's at because of differences in literacy. And is it fair to say that the people whose literacy is at the lower end should not be catered for? No, it's not really fair to say that. They are never going to be reading Pope. And it's unfair for people to say, oh, well, then there should be nothing for them. Of course there should be something for them. If you are capable of reading something better, you probably shouldn't be reading the garbage. You know, unless you really like reading it, but I get bored, so I'm just not going to read it. I find it very boring writing to read. I ask for different things out of writing. Then you get to the fourth book. And the fourth book is different. The fourth book is, instead of more or less railing against the London literary scene, is actually far more savage towards London in general and the government in general and the world in general. Pope by this point is, by the time he is writing the fourth book, is towards the end of his life. I think he is more cynical about the world and the way things have gone throughout his lifetime. Keeping in mind he was a Catholic and therefore always an outsider to political life. He was not someone who was considered an insider in the world, and he didn't have to remain that way. He could have chosen to convert. Was it a deep religious feeling, or was it more the outsider status suited him? We don't know. We really genuinely do not know that about Pope. But as a satirist, it probably doesn't do too well to be too cozy with the establishment, but at the same time, a lifetime on the outer is pretty hard to bear. It wears on a person, I think, and I think you see that by the fourth book of the Dunciad. And in this book of the Dunciad, the Goddess of Dullness has tragedy and comedy well under her yoke. Tragedy's place has been supplanted by history, which Pope does not see as an equivalent to tragedy. because history is more manipulatable in some ways. Like tragedy played out has a very striking black and white quality. It's this person went and screwed up and this is what happening. Oedipus Rex. Yeah, you did this. This is what happens. Whereas history is a much more slippery fish. And comedy is being propped up, quite literally, being propped up by the muse of satire, who does not like dullness, but dullness keeps around. But satire is the prop for comedy. And I think Pope sees this also as an inferior thing, because satire is an aggressive form of comedy. A satire is laughing with knives. I think I used that Australian term in the Gulliver video. Satire is also very short-lived, as we can see. 300 years, this thing does not hit the same. Whereas comedy is... Satire divides, but comedy unites. And I think that Pope is definitely seeing that satire is one of the lower forms of comedy. So, you know, when you say lower forms of comedy, most people usually think of slapstick. But you put a theatre full of people and show them slapstick, really good slapstick, and they will roar. They will absolutely roar with laughter, and that brings people together. But satire, you know, you have a sympathetic audience, they will laugh. You have a not so sympathetic audience, they'll throw rotten food at you. A satire does not have that bringing together quality. Tragedy and comedy are communal art forms, whether they're in theatre or literature or however. And it's interesting that Pope sees the goddess of dullness does not like either of these, because they are elevating. The catharsis of tragedy is elevating. It does bring you together. Everyone in the audience goes, my God, could you imagine being Oedipus, for instance, or Medea, or, you know, any of the great tragic characters. And comedy brings people together through joy and laughter. It's one of the great uniters. It's not for nothing that the Buster Keaton videos I've made are the most popular things. Why? It's 100 years old and it's still funny. It's always going to be funny, because comedy is like that. You know, it is always funny to watch some of these things. As I said, very, very well done physical humor, pratfalls, slapstick is funny. And those are things where you watch that in an audience, the audience will roar. Even if you watch it by yourself, you can roar with laughter. But watching it communally is supposed to be quite an experience. And I think that's something really is what Pope is talking about by that fourth book, is that a lot of the things he is criticizing are examples where dullness has taken these great communal things and has also had this leveling effect. A leveling effect wherein if everyone has the same experience, how do you get the great geniuses who provide these elevating forms. If everyone thinks the same, if everyone has been through the same schooling, if everyone has had every single spark of wit, meaning imagination and creativity, sometimes beaten out of them, if everyone has been told that ambition should be limited and constrained, then how can you have anything other than dullness? And who does dullness serve is another question. And I think part of the reason why the dullness is an issue in Pope's world is because, much the same as Swift was looking at the emergence of very strongly that emergence of capitalism and business as the preeminent sort of morality of the age in A Modest Proposal. Although Pope doesn't actually go into that, I think that that's what he's really kicking against. He's kicking against the fact that the world that he is in is one that is more concerned with, can I sell it and can I make a profit from it, than is it good? Is this valuable? Is this doing something for my fellow citizens? Is this elevating my fellow citizens? Is this elevating my country in the world? Is this elevating my age in history? No, it's, can I sell it? Can I sell it? And that, I think, gives this a certain... I think that is a way to look at this and understand what his frustrations with it. Because I don't think that there is an artist around, and that goes any kind of artist, literary, visual, video, musician, who is not frustrated with the, can I sell this? How do I sell this? Why is this not selling? How do I, how do I make something go viral? How do I make something do this so that I can actually earn a living from it? And I think that is where he is starting. I think that's where his frustration is coming from. Because although something like the court patronage of composers and painters is still more or less in vogue, at this time, literature has rather fallen out of the world of patrons to support it, where a poet can have a patron who will just let them do what they do so long as they write them a nice poem every so often. That sort of thing. That world is gone, and now you are in this rough and tumble mercantile world that is, does it sell? Does it sell? What is, and writing to that lowest common denominator. I think that is where Pope's frustration comes from. And I think in that respect, the poem itself is something that has resonance outside of its initial context. That is how I read the Dunciad. It's Pope's frustration with this commercial world that is springing up and developing around him, which is quite difficult. Now, if you've made it this far, I have a question for you. Now, you will have noticed when we are reading a lot of things like Pope or Swift or a lot of the 18th century writers that we look at, that needing to know about the ancient writers is kind of a necessity, especially with someone like Pope or Swift. They really lean heavy into it. I think part of it was after the 17th century and the wars with religion, it's like, right, that's it, no more Bible for you. Just no, pick something else. We don't care what, just not the Bible. Stop squabbling about this thing. I think that might have been what happened. And so they went, oh, well, Greece and Rome. So they went on Greece and Rome. The only issue is reading them without knowing Greece and Rome, is, would you like either myself, or if we can persuade her it's her idea, Her Infernal Majesty, to give you a rundown on potential, on like a basic primers of ancient Greek and Roman texts that would really help you understand 18th century things, that would really help you understand reading some of these other works. If we can persuade Her Infernal Majesty it's her idea, which she might like to do because it is sort of her wheelhouse, otherwise I will do it, I can do that. So if you are interested in that, please leave a comment below, because we'll work out how to do it. If you want to see Her Infernal Majesty talking about these things, which I'm sure would be somewhat interesting, just put HIM next to it. You want HIM. Yes, please, HIM would be great. Or just yes, please, if you would like, if you don't care if she does it or not. But yeah, that's the Dunciad. As I said, I like Pope, but this is not as reader friendly as some of his other pieces, and it's purely because satire is very, very satirical, and satire doesn't age terribly well. I think satire can age like milk. So you do have to sort of read it and think, well, how else can I read this thing? Which sounds a little bit rude to do, but sometimes that's what you have to do, what you have to do to actually be able to read these things sometimes. But that is the Dunciad. I think next time we will actually do our redo, and we will go to Germany with the Sorrows of Young Werther, because I did want to redo that one. That is one of the few ones that I will take down, because I'm not really happy with the one that I did. We will do a redo. We'll do the Sorrows of Young Werther next time. And so until then, farewell. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.